Hello and welcome to my presentation for EDL 850 Module 12 on tort liability. Tort is defined as harmful wrongdoing to a victim, which is usually remedied by legal action. There are two types of tort, intentional and unintentional. Intentional tort means that you intended to harm somebody and you're aware of the consequences before you acted. Some types of common tort you might find in a school could be battery and slander. Unintentional tort is usually the result of being negligent. So in this type of tort, you didn't mean to cause harm to the student or the staff member, but because you were failing to do your job appropriately, you caused harm to the student in some way. Let's look at 5 different tort cases in schools. The first case happened in 2008 when a student was playing around with another classmate in the classroom while unsupervised. This case, Barnett versus Caldwell, had a student, Miss Caldwell, who left her classroom for about 30 minutes. She had asked another teacher to supervise her classroom, but they had rooms that were connecting to one another, and the teacher that was supposed to be supervising while she left didn't come in and actually observe her classroom because he was busy with his own classroom. While she was out of the room, the students began to engage in horseplay, and in this incident, the student fell. Mr. Williams fell, dislocated his collarbone, which ended up severing an artery in his neck, which caused severe blood loss. When she returned to the classroom about 30 minutes later, Miss Caldwell called 911, but it was too late. He'd already bled out and was pronounced dead. Anthony Williams' parents sued the teacher for negligence, because she left her room without supervision. The courts found her innocent because her school handbook didn't define active supervision, and so they said that supervision was discretionary. Since she'd asked somebody to observe her classroom while she was gone, technically she was in the right, even though she wasn't actually there with her classroom. So there was no amount of money awarded to the plaintiff. The case was dismissed against Miss Caldwell. To prevent a situation like this from happening in your school, you should A, define active supervision as a teacher being in proximity of their classroom with eyes on their students at all times. And if a teacher can't be there, another staff member needs to be there as well. She could have prevented this by not leaving for 30 minutes from her classroom. That is a long amount of time to be stepping out and having somebody else cover when they're just next door. Your district can also make sure that students know that if somebody is injured in the classroom that they need to be calling 911. It seems silly to me that for 30 minutes that student laid there on the ground without any kids going to get help or getting another adult when obviously he was passing away. So as a district, make sure your students are educated on how to get help for their classmates. Make sure your teachers know what's acceptable and what's not when it comes to supervision, and have that definition clearly defined in your handbook so that if a teacher does act out of the expectations of the district, that is present. The next case we're going to look at is Hoyme versus Manhattan Beach City School District. In this case, the 10-year-old boy Michael was attending summer school when he decided to skip. He left the school without anybody really noticing, and he was hit by a car and taken to the hospital. Luckily, he didn't pass, but his mother states that she suffered some severe emotional injuries because she saw her child in the hospital. She said she was traumatized and that there was a lot of recovery for Michael because he was hit by a car, and that the school was liable. She said that because the school was negligent in their care for her son, he was able to leave the school building without being caught, so she sued for negligence. This time, the court ruled in favor of the school district. This case took place in 1974, but the articles I was reading said that given today's circumstances, it would be unlikely that the same verdict would be reached. They thought that today the court would rule in favor of the plaintiff because there should be more security measures in place for school districts. There's another case I'm covering today that talks about something similar, so we'll look at that aspect in just a minute. As a school district today, it's our job to keep our students safe, and even if you can't control whether a student leaves your school, you need to make sure you know that they're gone. I think a lot of school districts have security measures in which alarms sound when a student leaves. Power School or whatever measures they use to take attendance would notice that a student is gone. And so as a school district, I think it's important to just watch your students and make sure that they're still in the building, because you can be sued for something like this, and it would be ruled in the favor of the plaintiff if this were to happen today in modern day. The third case that we're looking at is Brockcheck versus Millard School District. This also took place in 1974, in which a PE teacher decided to hold golf activities and lessons in the gym due to rain. The student, David Brockcheck, had been absent prior to the day's lesson, so he hadn't learned how to hold a golf club appropriately, and thus he asked a student for help. As the other student was demonstrating to them how to swing the golf club, David stepped forward and was hit by the club, knocked unconscious, and died 2 days later. Brockcheck's mother sued the school district, stating that the two teachers that were supervising the gym didn't adequately train him, and they did not supervise their students in general, which caused her son to get harmed. Upon investigation, they found that the teachers didn't follow the appropriate protocol as designated in their recreational handbook about setting up the golf activity, and so the family was awarded about $54,000. And as a preventative measure, a school should be making sure that all safety measures are taken in place when setting up any activity, particularly one that should be done outside but has been modified for the indoors. So in the future, teachers should just make sure that everything is very safe and should be actively monitoring their students at all times. My district has 2 to 3 PE teachers in our gym at a time, since we do run larger PE classes, and so that helps keep our focus on the students, and we're always walking around and supervising them. So I think those types of preventative measures might have helped keep David alive if he were in our class. The next case we're going to look at is Mitchell versus Cedar Rapids Community School District. In this case, the unidentified student was 14 years old and had an IQ of 67. She had a paraprofessional with her at all times due to her low IQ, and she was considered unable to make appropriate decisions for herself. At this time, the student decided to leave school early with a friend and was raped while out of school by her 19-year-old boyfriend, who was also a student at the school. He also had significant developmental delays. The student was normally supervised at all times, and her parents argued that because of this constant supervision, it should have been noted that she was absent from school, and the parent should have been contacted so that they could have prevented the rape from occurring. The teachers in the district normally relied on a Power School type program to notify parents when their students were absent, but the absent notices didn't go out till later in the evening after the school day was over. Because the students in the special education were highly supervised, usually the teachers did call parents immediately when they found that their students had skipped, but unfortunately that didn't happen that day. So the parent was able to successfully sue the school district. They said that the school district failed to use appropriate security measures to contact parents and to see that their students had left the building. And so the plaintiff did receive an undisclosed amount of money for this. As a district, especially ones with special needs students, you need to make sure that you're monitoring your kids at all times. As I had stated earlier, it's important to keep security alarms on all doors, have cameras in place, etc. If you have students who you know need to be monitored all the time due to poor choices or inabilities to make their own decisions, you should always have a para or somebody walking with them, and never take your eyes off them. This is another active supervision issue where kids weren't supervised. They were let to walk out the building without anybody noticing, and so that's what consequently led to her being in a position where she was raped. So that's a way to prevent that, is just by keeping eyes on your students, especially those with exceptionalities and special needs, and making sure you have appropriate security measures in your school district to prevent that from happening. The last case that I'm going to discuss is Johnson & Johnson versus the School District of Millard, Nebraska. In this case, the first grader, Robbie Johnson, was in a music class when they performed London Bridge, in which the actions include two students standing across from each other holding hands and a third student standing in the bridge, so to speak, and then they get swung back and forth while they sing London Bridge. Robbie was in the middle of the bridge being swung back and forth when the students accidentally let go, causing Robbie to fly across the room and hit a bookcase, and he had to get 50 stitches on his eyes because he split open his head. The victim's mom sued the school district, saying that the music teacher failed to watch the class. The music teacher stated she was helping other students, but the student said that she was writing on the board. So because there was some discrepancies between the stories, and because of the young age of the students, the court did rule in favor of the Johnson family, stating that the teacher was negligent in her watching of the students, and they awarded the family about $21,000 in damages. Again, as a district, active supervision is very important, especially for those little kids. All kids, it's necessary for all kids, but especially the little ones. When you're teaching them a new game, you want to make sure that they're held safe at all times, and so you can't turn your back on them at all. So for my district, just continuing to talk about active supervision, what that looks like, walking around the room, giving trainings to teachers, etc., is going to help this type of thing from happening in my district. Here's a list of the sources that I used. I referenced a lot of legal cases in this, and if you'd like to learn more about those cases, there's the links provided for you. And lastly, I just want to say thanks for watching. I hope you learned a little bit about the different cases. I had a nice time reading about these different things, and it was interesting to me what types of things the districts could be sued for, and it helped me learn more about what not to do as a teacher and as an administrator. Thanks.